GCSE English is a hard subject. You have to learn like 100 quotes, be able to analyse them all in detail, and write so freaking fast that your hands are basically stumps by the end of the exam season. But there's one particular type of question that strikes fear into even the strongest students. That's comparison questions. Like this one, these ones, and even this one. Man, we all hate unseen poetry questions, don't we? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to take two texts or poems, spot what's actually worth comparing, and write high-level comparative paragraphs regardless of your current skill level. If you're new here, I'm Sam. I've been an English tutor at Strong Students for 4 years, where I team up with my brother Josh to help ambitious GCSE students master maths and English. Let's get into it. Before we look at comparing English texts, let's compare two completely random things: pizza and eggs. If I asked you, which is better for maintaining a strong, lean and healthy body, what would you do here? You'd probably look at both foods side by side in terms of some shared metrics. So for example, in terms of the calories, in terms of the nutrients, maybe how full they make you feel, right? So for example, in terms of calories, pizza is much easier to overeat. One slice of pizza can have like 300 calories, whilst you'd have to eat 5 or 4 or 5, depending on the size, whole eggs. And we all know which option is more difficult to consume. Therefore, we'd say that eggs are probably a better option for health and performance than pizza based on the calorie metric, as they don't facilitate weight gain in the same way pizza does. Now you may be wondering why you've just examined the biochemistry of eggs and pizza. This is English, right? Not science. Well, yes. But what you just did is exactly what English examiners want from you. You took two things with a shared purpose, foods that fuel your body. You identified differences. You explained why those differences matter, and you use specific criteria to shape your comparison: calories, nutrients, energy impact. And that is how we compare, and it's exactly the same in English. When a question asks you to compare two writers, it wants you to find out what they're doing, how they do it similarly or differently, and why those differences help shape meaning. Now, writers don't all write about pizza and eggs, but they do share tools. Whenever you're comparing two texts, you're really comparing how two writers use these tools to convey their ideas. We're going to learn these tools as the Core Comparative Methods, which are the textual features that all writers use to convey their ideas and perspectives, and which we can therefore contrast and examine to establish similarities and/or differences. These include ideas, arguments, and perspectives, which are like the writer's main messages and perspectives conveyed through quotations; characters, settings, and events; the vehicles that writers use to convey their messages and perspectives, as well as their presentation through language and structure. We have techniques, which are the language or structural devices writers deploy to achieve similar or different effects. We have tone and voice, which are the similar or different ways writers express themselves; and focus, which are the key aspects of the texts that writers divert the reader's attention to, and why. For GCSE English, we're expected to be able to apply the core comparative methods to two texts. For English Language Paper 2, these are non-fiction sources. For English Literature Paper 2, these are typically poems, anthology or unseen. To make things more concrete, we're going to compare two non-fiction sources in relation to the following exam-style comparison question. Compare the ways the writers present their perspectives on girls' experiences of education. Now, for your reference, source A is taken from an interview of a schoolgirl named Grace, who spoke to an interviewer about the progress girls and women have made in education. Source B, on the other hand, is a memoir from a schoolgirl writing in the 1920s. She's describing her experience of being the only girl in her science class. Now, both sources are linked in a completely free worksheet in the description below. Feel free to read them through and complete the short answer questions before continuing with this video. So, when faced with a comparison question like this, the first thing you need to do is use the core comparative methods to decide whether the two sources are presenting the focus of the question in a similar or different way. Here, we're comparing what the writers have to say about the girls' experiences of education in both sources. Our first call of action is to select quotations from both texts and, drawing on the core comparative methods, outline how they're used similarly or differently. For example, let's say that we selected the two following quotations. Source A: I'm in a STEM club with about 10 other girls and we're encouraged, supported. And then for source B: my presence felt like an anomaly, a disruption in their world. Using the core comparative methods, we might say that the writers possess different perspectives. Both writers explore how girls face barriers in education, but while Grace in source A shows the progress that has been made, Eliza in source B is isolated and dismissed. See what we did there? We picked two quotes and, applying the same core comparative method to both, decided how they are different. From here, we've now got the backbone of a comparative paragraph and we can start writing. So, when it comes to writing comparison paragraphs in English, I want you to remember 4 key steps. Number 1 is your overarching point. Using the core comparative methods, highlight a similarity or difference between two texts. Then you have your PEA-EE paragraph for text 1. Write a PEA paragraph for the first text. Then you have your transition phrase, which is simply a word or group of words that allows you to pivot to the second text, like similarly if you find a similarity, or nonetheless if you find a difference. And then you have your PEA-EE paragraph for text 2 with comparative loops. So that is going to involve you writing a second paragraph for the second extract, but making sure to use comparative keywords like mirroring and contrasting in order to connect what you've said about source B back to source A. If you don't know what I mean by a PEA-EE paragraph, then make sure to watch the previous video I made about them. I'll link it in the description with the worksheet. Otherwise, let's go through each of these steps now and apply them to the practice question from before. Compare the ways the writers present their perspectives on girls' experiences of education. Step 1. Overarching point. The first part of any comparison paragraph is what we call an overarching point. This is your opening sentence, the claim that ties everything together. It's a clear, confident judgment that answers the question head on. A good overarching point does 3 things. It makes a comparative judgment, so it doesn't just say, this text is about X, but instead, this text sees X in this way, whereas this text sees it differently. It's going to reference one of the core comparative methods, like tone, ideas, focus, or language, and it's going to set up an argument, outlining the line of thinking you're going to explore. Now, if you're comparing similarities, your sentence might look something like this. Throughout both texts, the writers portrayed the focus of the question as X, Y, or Z. If you're looking at differences, then it might be like, whereas in text A, the focus of the question is presented as X. In text B, the focus of the question is seen as Y. Now, we previously decided that both texts explore barriers for girls, but with contrasting perspectives. Optimism in source A, isolation in source B. So, here's a strong overarching point. Both writers explore how girls face barriers in education, but while Grace in source A shows that progress has been made, Eliza in source B is isolated and dismissed. Simple, clear, effective. Step 2. Source A, PEA-EE. Now that we've got our overarching point, we need to build a paragraph around source A using PEA. Let's use the exact same quote from earlier to do this. I'm in a STEM club with about 10 other girls, and we're encouraged, supported. Here's what a top grade analysis paragraph would look like for this quote. Indeed, In source A, the writer presents a more hopeful and progressive perspective on girls' experiences in education. This is shown when Grace says, "I'm in a STEM club with about 10 other girls, and we're encouraged, supported," illustrating how she feels part of a community and is receiving the kind of affirmation that would have been rare in the past. This is supported by the use of the collective pronoun we, which signals inclusion and shared confidence. Compounded by the verbs encouraged and supported, this creates a tone of warmth and positivity, as if female participation in science is no longer resisted, but actively nurtured. Now we're talking, mate. Step 3. Transition phrase. Before we jump into source B though, we need to bridge the gap with what we call a transition phrase. Think of this as a word or a string of words that allows you to connect what you've said about source A with what you want to say about source B. Now, there are two main types of transition phrases. You've got your contrasting transition phrases, which are used when you want to make another point that is different to your original one. This includes words like however, nevertheless, nonetheless, by contrast, and contrarily. And then you've got what we call a supportive transition phrase, which is used when you want to make another point that highlights a similarity with your original one. This includes words like similarly, likewise, furthermore, moreover, additionally, and also. Now, since our comparison is highlighting a difference, we're going to use a contrasting transition phrase. In this case, we're going to go with however and simply attach it to the end of the first paragraph, which then looks like this. Step 4. PEA paragraph 2 and comparative loops. Now we want to write a paragraph about source B, but this time we need to loop back to source A to highlight the differences. This is where you're going to use what are called comparative keywords. Think of these guys as the bridges between the two texts, enabling you to explain the similarities or differences. For similarities, you're going to use words like mirroring, echoing, paralleling, relating to, corroborating, and reinforcing. For differences, you're going to use words like contrasting, contradicting, opposing, and juxtaposing. Now, for our paragraph, we're going to use the previous source B quote. My presence felt like an anomaly, a disruption in their world. Using this quote, we're now going to produce another analysis paragraph, except in this one, we're going to consciously try to make sure we're looping back to source A and utilizing comparative keywords. However, the writer of source B presents girls' experiences of education as lonely and combative, shaped by exclusion and doubt. This is shown when the narrator reflects, my presence felt like an anomaly, a disruption in their world, highlighting how she feels like she does not belong. Her identity as a girl clashes with a male-dominated space around her, directly juxtaposing the inclusivity experienced by Grace, who felt supported rather than marginalized. Moreover, the noun anomaly suggests Eliza is seen as unnatural or out of place, reinforcing how her presence breaks a norm. This is compounded by the noun disruption, which implies hostility, as if she is not just different, but unwanted. Thus, whereas Grace's narrative is marked by encouragement, Eliza must assert herself against resistance, underscoring clear differences in tone, optimism versus defiance. And now we have a complete high-level comparative paragraph, which comes out looking a little bit like this. He's a chunky boy, isn't he? Now, optionally, you can separate your comparison paragraphs at the transition phrase. This would create two paragraphs looking something like this. Both options are totally valid. As a tutor and an educator, I'd recommend splitting them, to be honest, because some teachers and examiners just get really funny about you making like long paragraphs. But for both GCSE and A-level English, I used the first structure, so where the two are combined, and it didn't stop me from getting my 2 grade 9s in English and an A star at A-level. Damn, did I just flex? I did, mate. Oh well. It's better to have a chatty English teacher than one who's scared of their own shadow, I guess. Pretty sure Scooby-Doo, though, he was also scared of his shadow. He'd be a pretty sick English teacher. And that's it. Comparison unlocked. If you can make smart overarching points, write analytical PEA EE paragraphs, and loop them together with transition phrases and comparative keywords, you'll be writing comparison paragraphs that are better than about 99% of students in the country. As mentioned earlier, if you're still unsure about what a PEA paragraph actually is, then make sure to watch the video on how to write them. It's in the description with the worksheet, but I'll also link it here for you. Oh, and one last thing. If this video helped, please try and share it with a friend. My brother Josh and I are on a mission to help as many GCSE students as possible accelerate their grades this year, and we cannot do it without your help. Every single share and positive word makes a huge difference. Otherwise, I hope this video has helped you today. Keep working hard and stay strong. I'll see you in the next video.